Um, you came in. You were among 700 candidates for the job, I believe I read, and they chose you.
News to me.
And that's a lot of candidates. I hope they didn't interview every one of them. But you've had some interesting fights, and I thought we'd end with some of your fights because they bring us right up to modern times. But almost at the beginning, you took on Disney. Now, what I found interesting about that, and that was when Disney was going to open up out by the Civil War fields in Virginia here, out by Manassas. But the head of the National Trust at the time, the head of the board, I think, was Robert Bass. And the Bass family are sort of Disney. How'd that go down?
Actually, he was no longer chairman of the board.
Okay,
But,
that's how that went
but
down.
in fairness, I never heard from Bob Bass about this. He never
Really?
tried to influence me or
But
anything.
you must have had to take a deep breath and dive in, knowing that, that it's very close to home.
Well, this was not a traditional preservation issue because on the site where Disney was going to build its theme park.
Preemptive preservation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There were no historic structures, nor had anything historic occurred there.
Right.
But the more we thought about it, if this park had taken place, it would have created collateral sprawl in all directions for about 20 miles and would have created, within 20 years, a city the size of Tallahassee, Texas, which would have totally obscured one of the most significant historic landscapes in America, the northern Piedmont of Virginia. So that's why we did it.
Did you think, my impression was that Disney rolled over pretty easy.
Well, where were you? Huh?
I was here.
No, I didn't think it was easy at all. No.
I expected them to fight you right down. I expected
Well,
it to be like the Democratic primary campaign.
Well, we expected them to go on for 2 or 3 years. We thought there'd be litigation to do all kinds of stuff. But what happened was that I think we touched them where they felt it, and that was in their public image. We got David McCullough, Jim McPherson, Shelby Foote, a lot of prominent historians involved. And this is the first time historians had really gotten involved in a preservation fight like this. It was a very high profile issue, and I think they didn't want to take the heat. So they cut their losses.
And they didn't try to do it anywhere else.
No, they didn't. But we kind of let them off the hook by persuading them to say, we'll look for another place.
Right, but they
never did. Right.
Was that difficult for you in that coming out of the Carter administration, Jody Powell was basically working for Disney?
He was, and we've had a couple interesting conversations about that since. But Jody remains a good friend.
Good.
That's the great thing about Washington, Your friend yesterday is going to be on the other side tomorrow. So
you go at each other, and then you get up and
exactly.
shake hands. Well, now you're sort of taking on the energy department with these big
transmission lines.
Transmission line. What are they called? Transmission pathways or something that want to go through several states.
Exactly. And
Tell us about
we're not leading this fight, but
you're in it.
But we're supporting it. Exactly. Yeah. They're putting these new high transmission wires through a lot of historic areas of Virginia, and not just in Virginia, but in New York State and elsewhere.
I saw D.C. on the list.
Well, they'll eventually get here. I mean, they claim they need them to transmit power. And I'm not enough of an expert to know whether that's true or not, but there's some reason to be skeptical about that. But the fact is, when they get these things authorized by Congress, they're allowed to obviate the Historic Preservation Act and the environmental acts, and they can do a lot of damage in the process. So we're trying to slow this process down and make it more deliberate and trying to encourage them to find routes that are much less damaging in their impact of the environment and the historic resources that are there.
Is this a timetable or a deadline that's based on who's in the White House? I mean, is that going to be a factor?
Well, I think sometimes, but what we found, and even though, as you mentioned at the outset, that I have a Democratic background, we found that preservation is one of those issues that transcends politics. We're talking about saving the country's heritage for the most part.
Right.
So we have good support from this administration, as we did from the Clinton administration, and from members of both parties in the Congress. So it's not a political issue.
Can you take your work outside the United States?
We've only done that once, and it's an interesting example. Several years ago, we put Ernest Hemingway's home in Cuba, the Finca Vigía, on our endangered list. This is where Ernest Hemingway lived longer than any other place.
Have you been there?
I've been there a couple
lucky.
times. It's a wonderful place. He lived there 22 years, wrote The Old Man on the Sea and a lot of his other great masterworks. And it had been deteriorated. His widow, I should say, gave it to the Cuban people after Hemingway died in the 60s. And they used it as a museum because he's as revered in Cuba, if not more so, than he is here. But it deteriorated, and they don't have a whole lot of resources that they can devote to this sort of thing. So we put it on our endangered list, and our biggest issue was trying to get permits from the State Department to go down there and work under this embargo.
That's a trip I want to go on.
Well, we'll come along, and we've had several permits. We currently just got a new one, but to take technical assistance down there, working with the Cuban people, who have welcomed us with open arms. We can't take anything of any monetary value down there, but they've welcomed our expertise and our support.
Do you think under Raul you'll get any different?
I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough about that. But my guess is there will be a change in this relationship in the near future under some new administration.
You feel confident the house will be preserved?
The house is now preserved.
Right.
And now we're working on the landscape and some of the outbuildings. The house has been beautifully restored. Right.
You're a Civil War buff,
Of
expert,
sorts.
author. Between jobs, you wrote a book on the Minnesota Regiment.
The last full measure, the first Minnesota Volunteers. Right.
And did they not have? They did not have a good time of it, did they?
They had a really bad time.
They did not do well.
They were the first regiment offered up to Lincoln after Fort Sumter in Minnesota, and they came out here very early in 1861 and fought in every battle of the Army of the Potomac, and this culminated at Gettysburg on the second day, where they literally saved the day, but they incurred 82% casualties. And so I knew this story when I was back in Minnesota, and I was one of the great satisfactions of my life was going through the letters and the diaries of these men who served in this regiment, and that really, I let them tell the story themselves. And it also had a very happy consequence because in the course of researching this book, I got involved in Civil War battlefield preservation, which has been an important issue, especially in this part of the country, and that led directly to my coming to the National Trust, which I'd never anticipated.
Well, it's sweet that it turned out that way, isn't it?
Very.
Is the Civil War your favorite time in history?
No. Well, I'm much more interested in Lincoln than I am in the Civil War. I'm not interested in military history so much. Fortunately, there are a lot of other people who are, but I'm just I cannot get enough of Abraham Lincoln.
So, what's your favorite historic landmark in Washington?
The Lincoln Cottage.
There you go. Good place to end. Thank you very much, Dick. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see you next week. Thank you very
Karen.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.